What I have a problem with, and what most Americans have a problem with, is radical Islam. And when you talk about Israel or Zionism, which I'm shocked that it made it in that quickly in this debate. Jesus Christ.
We've got to bring it in.
We got to get the 7K.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, look, in 1801, the United States fought its very first war as a country, the Barbary Wars. We actually fought it twice, 1801 to 1805, and then I think 1811 to 1815. And we fought Islamists off the coast of Libya. This is 140 years before Israel was even created as a state. And Thomas Jefferson sends dignitaries to talk to the Islamists, like, why are you kidnapping U.S. merchants? Why is it that you're kidnapping U.S. sailors? And they said, well, you are the infidels, and we are commanded in our Quran. Now, we can debate, is that a true interpretation or not? But at the end of the day, who the hell cares if it's a true interpretation if Muslims are committing acts of violence through Islam? So I have no problem with Islam as a doctrine. What I do have a problem with is radical Islam. And the last point I'll make, and then I'll shut up, and I think it's really important for people to get this.
So don't shut up.
Okay, fine. Is there have been since 9/11 58,000 Islamic terrorist attacks across the world. There has not been a country, with the exception of like 4, that have been immune from Islamic terrorist attacks. Jews named Shabbos Kestenbaum who wear kippahs aren't going to blow you up on subways. But unfortunately, a guy who walks into a New York City subway with a backpack and yells Allah Akbar, unfortunately, gives Islam a bad name. We can talk about Nice, France, 2017 Paris attacks, the reason TSA checks your shoes, the underwear bomber, New Orleans ISIS attack, Westminster, Boston Marathon, Manchester Arena, Pan Man bombing, Fort Hood, Beltway sniper, Bali, murder of Lee Rigby, USS Cole bombing, London Bridge attack, Madrid, Charlie Hebdo, San Bernardino, U.S. Marines Beirut bombing, Little Rock Army, Chattanooga military base, Polk nightclub, New York City ISIS trucker attack, the Boulder, Colorado firebombing, D.C. shooting. These were literally all committed by radical Muslims. I wish that wasn't true, but unfortunately it is true, and we have to recognize that reality.
Well, I want to make one point real quick, Bo. I'm going to let you get in. But at the beginning of your rebuttal, or whatever you want to call it, you did mention Libya, and now Libya, I think, is a perfect example of why it's bad when America goes and destabilizes a country, because Muammar Gaddafi, we destabilized them, and now Libya is the only place where there's actual slavery. So
Whoa. First of all, that's not true. Qatar has actual slavery as well. In fact, the only places
they import slavery like they did for FIFA and stuff, but they have slave trade. They have slave auctions in Libya. They do not have that.
But doesn't that prove my point, though, that the only countries actually where slavery actually is legalized are Islamist countries? I mean, it's a major problem. In fact, the biggest slave traders in the world historically were not white Westerners in the United States or in England. It were Muslim countries. So there's a tremendous problem with slavery in Muslim countries today. But I would agree with you. I'm not a fan of regime change. Libya, I think, could have been done differently. Having said that, though, there was a popular uprising amongst Libyans in the same way today in Iran. There's a popular uprising amongst the majority of Iranians. But absolutely, I'm not in favor of regime change. To be fair, I was 4 years old during the Iraq War, but I would have opposed it. I think Iran is a totally different argument to make. But in terms of the fundamental theological differences between Islam and the West, let's say, is Muhammad Nusarit. He's a scholar of Islam in Chicago, and he gave a speech just last month. You can all Google it right now. And he talks about that Islam is superior than all other religions, and we must dominate American culture. That's really bad. And America's a Christian nation. I'm saying this as an Orthodox Jew. It's good for America to remain a Christian nation. We should encourage way more people, especially Gen Z white men, to go to church and find Jesus and learn the New Testament. But unfortunately, there's an increasing amount of Islamic radicals who don't believe in that.
Okay, let me.
What I would say is it's not like we have 1,400 years of history of Islam on the march, taking over countries, purging Christians and other non-believers. And then you have just, thank God for social media. We have now in the United States, we have imams here, clerics here who are openly talking about conquering America, making Islam, bringing Islam into every single household. I mean, it is, I would argue, radical Islam is a redundant term. I think Islam is in and of itself radical. I think the more true statement is that not all Muslims are Islamists. And I think that's the bigger issue here. Is Islam is what we're talking about. Islam is the problem. Islam is, taking over large swaths of America. We've seen this huge influx just in Texas, right? You think Texas is this place that's like the bastion of freedom and liberty in America. And 300 mosques have been built recently. These are like forward operating bases for, the Islamist movement. And I think most people are concerned about it, rightly so. We see, when they sort of bring this kind of third world, low IQ mentality into communities, they take over, they get people on city councils, they elect people like Ilhan Omar to Congress. There's certainly tons of fraud around that. There's lots of money laundering. Even in Texas, we had, a big trial, 20 years ago now, where they were found all of this money being laundered back to terrorist organizations. So, I mean, this is a problem that is growing in America, and I think too many of our politicians have just ignored it. I mean, how many of us remember when George Bush was like, Islam is a religion of peace? But that's not what Islam says. Islam specifically says, convert, submit them, or kill them if they don't.
Well, and I want to give Sulaiman a chance, but real quick, I just want to say this point. You know, we talk about Hamas, you know, and they say, you know, Hamas is obviously nobody likes Hamas, but if you're a 12-year-old and somebody blows up your dad, you don't have a dad, wouldn't that radicalize you to join Hamas? I mean, I think it would if I was in that kid's situation.
Okay, that's fine, but why are we importing them here? I care less about what happens over there. I mean, it's a tragedy, and I feel bad for the people. I mean, I love people. I don't want innocent people to suffer and all of it. I mean, obviously. But we're talking about America, right? The last bastion of freedom in the world. Are we going to protect America and our culture? To your point, it is a Christian nation. That doesn't mean that everybody in America has to be a Christian. And I don't think the founders, you know, explicitly said that everyone had to be a Christian, but they certainly agreed that, you know, we had the freedom to be Christian, and the entire Constitution was written because they agreed that, like, this was the culture that we wanted in America.
Can I piggyback real quick, and then I promise I'll shut up.
Yeah.
In terms of the specifics of the question, first of all, I agree with you. The United States has no obligation to import people who objectively do not share our culture, do not share our values. So that's first and foremost. In terms of the practicalities, if you're this 12-year-old boy in Gaza and your dad is a Hamas terrorist and he's blown up by Israel, aren't you going to become a Hamas terrorist? That logic has literally never been applied to any war ever fought in human civilization. When we killed Nazi Germans, we didn't say, well, if you're a 12-year-old German and you just saw your dad, who's an SS commander, being shot to death, then you're going to become an SS man. No, because we recognize that bad ideas and threats to the West must be eradicated. The best way to ensure peace on earth is you so overwhelmingly kill the enemy combatants that they never have the military capabilities nor the ideology to try to pillage a sovereign country ever again. So the best way to ensure peace on earth is overwhelming military dominance and re-education of the populace, who unfortunately have been fed a diet of political indoctrination that the best way to martyr yourself and to get into heaven is by killing innocent civilians.
Okay, let me respond now.
Yeah,
There's been literally about 10 minutes, right? And 2 people. Yeah.
Sorry.
So just, no, it's all good. Let me go one at a time. So in terms of like this claim that, oh, guess what, when you build mosques. So first of all, I agree. The United States of America is a Christian nation based on Christian values. And so therefore, Judaism and Islam almost sits in a similar position in terms of being external to Christianity. That being said, this claim that mosques are outposts is like completely ridiculous. He also mentioned about Islam saying convert and kill. That's not a doctrine within Islam. The Quran quite explicitly says within the Quran there is freedom of religion. Actually, it's in... And the Quran is a lot more lenient in terms of apostasy compared to Christianity and Judaism, which has a lot more harsher punishment when it comes to apostasy. Now, in terms of this claim about Muslims taking over the United States of America, it's just one of the most ridiculous claims ever. And the reason for it is because if you look at Muslims numerically, they're a very low percentage in the United States of America. When you look at Muslims in terms of key positions of power, they're in extreme minority. You can see disproportionately Jewish people are actually in positions of power, whether it's in politics, whether it's in the media, whether it's in large number of things. And so to make this claim about Islam, it just isn't true in reality. In terms of, I don't know who mentioned it, but someone mentioned about preachers stating things that are extreme. So are there preachers who state extreme things? Of course there is. There's going to be extremists amongst all religions. For example, anyone's on X, you always see, for example, Jewish rabbis, who will be saying extreme things about Goyim and Gentiles and so on and so forth. And those videos go viral. And so you can take individual rabbis or imams or priests and say, look, this is the mainstream position. But in reality, you can do that with any religion. In terms of I think Shabbos mentioned it. He mentioned about Islam has this idea of being superior. That's not true. Actually, in Islam, we have this position that all man is equal, irrespective of race, religion, or creed. The Prophet, peace be upon him, his last sermon talked about it doesn't matter what race you are, black, white, brown. It doesn't matter what religion you are. All man is equal. Actually, it's in Judaism where this notion comes, where there is this superiority of a Jew compared to a Gentile or a Goyim or whoever you want to say. So in reality, like that claim is false. In terms of the Barbary Wars, so those pirates, they were within the Ottoman Empire, but they were acting like pirates. Their basis wasn't based on the dictates of the actual empire. They were acting almost without permission, without any regard, and actually they were reprimanded on that. And again, look, historically, if you want to look at it historically, where has the biggest beef been? Western society, Christianity. For thousands of years, the biggest problem actually has been Judaism. If you look at it, they were thrown out of 109 countries. thousands of times. Many times Jews and Muslims made alliances. If you remember, it was the Jews who opened up the doors for during the Crusades and so on and so forth. So this idea that basically, Judaism and Christianity has been loggerheads with Islam is rewriting history, because in reality it was the other way around. It was Judaism that had major issues with Christianity historically. And when you say it's an issue of Islam, you need to specifically give dictates within Islam that hold that position. The Quran is the word of God, right? It's certain knowledge according to Muslims. So we believe there's nothing in the Quran that could be wrong. When one takes a hadith narration, those are probabilistic knowledge, and therefore that could be right or wrong. So therefore, I presume he's going to pull out with a hadith and say, oh, guess what? It says this in a hadith. But hadith can never supplement the Quran. The Quran is the word of God. It literally says in the second chapter of the Quran, there is no compulsion in religion. Whereas when you look at, and this is what my thesis is, that whatever you find in Islam, you'll find it in Judaism, you'll find it in Christianity, and actually the punishment in those religions are a lot more harsher. I think I covered in terms of extremism, so there's a lot more comments that were made, apologies. So
one thing I will say, though, to be fair, in the Old Testament, there are a lot of instances where people are told to be put to death for kind of, innocuous reasons. I mean, but if you do look at the Old Testament. So I'm just saying, in that, spiritual doctrine, there is some killing
I believe
in
it's
it.
harsher.
I mean, I'm just, calling balls and strikes. But
as Christians, we have a new covenant, right? That's what the New Testament is.
I agree.
So the difference between the Bible and the Quran is the later part of our Bible, things moderate dramatically when it comes to things like putting people to death and whatever.
So you're talking about the Torah?
So let me defend first of all the Hebrew Bible, not the Old Testament. It's fine.
Don't try and appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. Don't Jew-splain. First of all, in terms of the goyim thing, goy literally just means nation. So Jews are also goyim. So I know on Twitter that's red meat to the base,
no,
like saying we're goyim.
Sorry, is it Gentile or is that?
Well, Gentile just means non-Jew, but that's not a biblical term. That's just a sociological term.
Being Jewish, you're not a chosen people. I mean, that.
But chosen doesn't mean better, and that's why Judaism is one of the. Hang on, let me explain.
But isn't that semantics? But go ahead.
It's not semantics at all. There's literally, again, in the Hebrew Bible, you will not find at any point Jews saying that. That's why when you said Jewish supremacy or Jews believe we're better, I mean, we literally don't. If you want to be oppressed for 3,000 years, by all means, you're happy to convert to Judaism and circumcise your penis. But I don't think most people want to do that thing. We're one of the only religions that don't convert, not because we think we're better than you. We just think you don't have to live a life in accordance with 613 commandments. What you do have to do is 7 Noahide laws, which anyone should do.
Tony Dokapol, the new CBS guy, got an adult circumcision.
That's weird.
Yeah, I know,
that's really weird.
Sorry to go back to your point, but he did.
Is that how he got his promotion?
That's very well said. You must be circumcised
as an adult, but I just want to say
although to be fair,
RFK
also said men should be. Oh no, he said circumcision leads to like retardation or something.
Oh,
but
wow.
But in terms of the specifics of the point, the parameters of this debate is not theological, right? So I don't think it's worthwhile to talk about what the Quran says versus what the Hebrew Bible says, because it's kind of irrelevant. I've never read in full.
No, because he said Islam. That's why.
Right. So let me respond. So that's why all I care about is the practicalities. I care how I, as a Jewish person, as an American, will be impacted. So whether the Quran or the Hadith is superior, it doesn't really matter. All I care about is there a disproportionate amount, unfortunately, of Muslims, not all Muslims, obviously, but of many Muslims who will use theological justifications to kill other people. That's where I have my problems. So if you want to talk about, well, the Hebrew Bible has verses that are definitely incompatible with Western civilization, one, I would disagree with you. But even if that's the case, which it isn't, it's kind of irrelevant because, as I said from the get-go, American Jews aren't committing terrorist attacks. White Christian Americans are not committing terrorist attacks. But unfortunately, we are seeing that way too many Muslims are coming into the United States who are not interested in assimilation, who are not interested in adopting Western democracy, and unfortunately take violence as a political or religious necessity. That's where it becomes problematic. And to deny that is to deny reality itself. And the last point I want to make is I'm not entirely sure what you meant when you said Jews opened the door for the Crusaders, because we have a lot of fast days, which again, you're more than welcome to be Jewish, but trust me, you don't want to be, because like half the year we're just abstaining from eating and drinking. One of the fast days is when we fast over the Crusades, because they were awful. I mean, the communities of Mainz and Worms across Europe were decimated by the Crusaders. So the idea that we would open the door for the Crusaders is just divorced from reality. We were butchered by the Crusaders.
I'm saying you support the Muslims.
Well, no, because under the Muslim rule, we were granted second-class citizens. We were dhimmis, and we paid a jizya tax, which is not a great terminology for 21st century lexicon, but we actually paid a tax as second-class citizens to our Muslim rulers. So it was not all great living under the Muslims either. The only time Jews ever had a peaceful coexistence is when we were living in our ancestral homeland, the land of Judea. We are one of the only religious groups in the world that are actually named after the place we come from. Jews come from Judea, Arabs come from Arabia, but you wouldn't really know that because the Arab colonization was one of the greatest colonization experiments in human history, which is why they're now all over the world. They dominated Spain. They're trying to dominate the United States. Jews aren't trying to expand territory. As much as on Twitter you'll talk about the Greater Israel Project, it's not a thing. In fact, Israel has given more land away since its establishment in 1948 than any other country.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.